Okay, so get ready because today we are diving deep into Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official investigation into UFOs. It ran from 1952 to 1969. Now, I know you're pretty into this whole UFO thing, and trust me, we've got a ton of reports and documents and firsthand accounts to get through,
Yeah.
thousands of cases, everything from misidentified planes to sightings that still have people baffled. This is way more than just X-Files stuff. Are you ready?
Absolutely. What's so interesting is that Project Blue Book didn't just come out of nowhere. It was actually the culmination of years of the government trying to figure out this whole phenomenon. And it started even before 1952.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's go back a bit then. What was happening before Blue Book? Like, where does this story really begin?
Well, the UFO craze can be traced back to 47, with Roswell, of course, and just a wave of sightings across the U.S. And that led to Project Sign, which
Okay.
was the military's first attempt at investigating these weird events in the sky. And get this, Project Sign actually produced a classified report suggesting that UFOs might be extraterrestrial.
Whoa, really? They were considering aliens right from the get-go.
Yeah, it seems that way. But the higher-ups, they weren't convinced. They wanted proof.
Of course.
So Project Sign was shut down and then replaced with Project Grudge in 49.
So Project Grudge was more skeptical then.
Oh, yeah, much more. There was a total shift in attitude, moving away from the idea of aliens. They were focused on explaining these sightings as just misidentified aircraft or weather or even hoaxes.
Interesting. So how does Blue Book fit into all of this? Was it like a continuation of Grudge's skepticism, or did it go in a totally different direction?
That's where it gets really interesting, because in 52, Captain Edward J. Ruppelt took charge of Project Blue Book, and he brought a whole new way of looking at these investigations.
Okay, so tell me more about this Captain Ruppel. What made him different?
Well, first of all, he was a very well-respected airman, an aeronautical expert. He was actually the one who came up with the term unidentified flying object to replace, those sensationalized terms like flying saucer.
Ah, so he was going for a more neutral scientific approach.
Exactly. He wanted to, move away from all the hype and actually figure out what was going on. And he took it seriously. He streamlined how they reported sightings, developed standardized questionnaires for witnesses, and he even brought in the Battelle Memorial Institute to analyze cases statistically.
Well, that does sound pretty rigorous. He was really bringing some scientific method to the whole thing.
Absolutely. He even had the authority to interview any military personnel who had seen UFOs, which shows you how seriously the Air Force was taking this, at least at first.
So under Ruppelt's leadership, were there any cases that really stood out?
Oh yeah, there were several. But two that come to mind are the Lubbock Lights and then the radar and visual sightings over D.C. in 52.
Ooh, tell me about those.
All right, so the Lubbock Lights involved multiple witnesses, including some college professors, who all reported seeing these strange lights in the sky. They were forming formations over Lubbock, Texas in 51. And even after they investigated thoroughly, those lights remained unexplained.
It's pretty spooky. What about the DC sightings?
Well, those were even more dramatic. In the summer of 52, there were all these radar and visual sightings of UFOs over D.C. And it wasn't just random people seeing something weird. We're talking about blips on radar screens from multiple agencies, including the Air Force and even the White House.
Wow, UFOs over the White House.
Yeah.
Things were really heating up. So how did the government respond to all this?
Well, with all this attention on UFOs, from the public and the military, the CIA decided to get involved. They put together the Robertson Panel in 53, which was a group of scientists tasked with reviewing Blue Book's findings
Right.
and making recommendations.
Okay, and what did they conclude? Did they finally say that aliens were visiting us?
Not quite. Their official conclusion was that most UFO reports could be explained conventionally and that it wasn't worth studying further. But their next recommendation is what really shook things up.
All right, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they suggest?
They recommended a public debunking campaign to try and lessen public interest in UFOs. They said they should use the media celebrities, even Walt Disney productions, to basically downplay the phenomenon and convince the public that there was nothing to worry about.
Wait, are you serious? A government-sponsored campaign to, like, shape public opinion about UFOs?
Yeah, it's true. And it's a really crucial detail because it reveals that there was a deeper agenda at play. Think about it. If the government really believed that UFOs were just weather balloons or whatever, why would they even bother with the propaganda campaign? Why not just release their findings and let people decide for themselves?
You've got a point there that's a little unsettling when you really think about it.
Yeah.
So what happened to Project Blue Book after that bombshell recommendation? Did they actually go through with that whole debunking campaign?
We could definitely argue that they did. because things took a pretty sharp turn after the Robertson panel.
Okay.
We'll get into all of that more in a bit.
Sounds good. There's so much more to uncover about Project Blue Book. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
So before we got sidetracked, we were talking about how the Robertson panel really changed the course of Project Blue Book.
Yeah, that whole recommendation for a debunking campaign, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So did Blue Book actually change how they did things after that?
Oh, they did. They really shifted their focus to minimizing the number of UFO reports that they couldn't explain. They even started reclassifying cases, ones that were previously unexplained, trying to make them fit into more conventional explanations. And a lot of the real investigative work was taken away from Blue Book and given to a more secretive intelligence unit, the 462nd Air Intelligence Squadron, or AIS.
So it sounds like things were getting a lot more hush-hush.
Yeah, for sure. There was a definite move toward secrecy and control, and this new direction, it really impacted the people working on Blue Book. Morale among the staff just plummeted, and the public's trust in the project started to erode.
Yeah, I can imagine. It must have been so frustrating for the people who actually wanted to investigate. To basically be told to downplay the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where Dr. J. Allen Hynek's story becomes really important. He was the project's scientific consultant from the very beginning, and his views on UFOs changed a lot during Blue Book.
Oh, right. You mentioned him earlier. He started out as a skeptic, right?
He did. At first, he thought that all these sightings could be explained rationally, but as he got deeper into these cases, reviewed the data, talked to witnesses, his skepticism started to fade. He found more and more cases that just couldn't be explained away as misidentified planes or weather.
So what did he do? Did he just keep his doubts to himself?
No, not at all. He became more and more critical of Blue Book's methods, especially under Major Hector Quintanilla in the 60s.
So Blue Book was still going in the 60s, but with more of a focus on debunking than actually investigating.
That's pretty much it, and this led to even more controversy, with some specific cases that really highlight Blue Book's questionable explanations.
Okay, I'm listening. What kind of cases are we talking about?
Well, there's this one. A series of sightings in the Midwest in '65. People were seeing these strange, multicolored lights and large, egg-shaped objects in the sky. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol even tracked multiple UFOs on radar. Some of them were descending way too fast for any normal aircraft.
That sounds pretty convincing. What did Blue Book say about that?
They said that people were just mistaking stars for UFOs, specifically Betelgeuse.
Betelgeuse?
Yeah,
Really?
but astronomers were quick to point out that Betelgeuse wasn't even visible in the sky at the time.
Oh, so they got caught. What other cases were there?
Well, there was the Portage County UFO chase in '66. Get this, multiple police officers chased a UFO for 85 miles. They gave really detailed reports, but Blue Book just dismissed it.
Huh.
They said they were chasing a satellite and then the planet Venus.
A satellite.
Yeah.
And then Venus. That's ridiculous.
It really shows how far Blue Book had strayed from its original purpose. They were just trying to come up with any explanation to make these sightings go away.
Yeah, it sounds like public trust in Blue Book was pretty low at this point.
Oh, definitely. And Hynek's criticism was getting louder and louder. He just couldn't stay silent anymore. In '68, he wrote this really scathing critique, outlining all of Blue Book's flaws and urging them to improve. He felt that the project had become a travesty of science.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. Especially coming from the project's own scientific consultant. Did anyone listen to him?
Sadly, no. His concerns were pretty much ignored by the people in charge. But he wasn't alone. Public pressure was mounting. And it all kind of culminated in this major event in '66, a congressional hearing on UFOs.
Okay, now that sounds like a turning point, a congressional hearing. This was getting serious.
Yeah, it was huge. The House Committee on Armed Services actually questioned the Air Force about how they were handling Project Blue Book.
So they were finally being held accountable. What happened at the hearing?
It got pretty intense. ANAP, which is the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. They're a big civilian UFO research group. Well, they publicly accused Blue Book of a cover-up. They even presented their own evidence, which contradicted the Air Force's explanations for certain sightings.
Wow, so they were really challenging the official story. How did the Air Force respond to that?
They didn't budge. They just kept saying that there was no evidence of a threat and that most sightings were misidentifications. But what really stood out was the testimony of two police officers who had been involved in a really well-known UFO chase. They said they felt like their reputations had been ruined by the Air Force's dismissive explanation.
I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been for them, to be involved in something so extraordinary, and then to be told that they basically imagined the whole thing.
Yeah.
It really shows how Blue Book was failing the people who came forward with their experiences.
Absolutely. This hearing really exposed the growing gap between what the Air Force was saying and what the public was seeing, and it led to the creation of another committee, the Condon Committee in '66.
Okay, another committee. Was this one more of the same, or did they take a different approach?
The Condon Committee was supposed to be neutral, a scientific body brought in to investigate UFOs once and for all.
Oh, that sounds promising. A neutral scientific approach is exactly what was needed. Did they actually settle the debate?
Unfortunately, no, not really. Even the Condon Committee was controversial. Some members accused the director, Edward U. Condon, of being biased against UFOs right from the start.
So even with a supposedly neutral committee, the controversy continued. What happened in the end? Did the Condon Committee produce a report?
They did. The Condon Report was released in '69, and it concluded that there was nothing extraordinary about UFOs, and that doing more scientific research probably wouldn't lead to anything groundbreaking.
So after years of investigation and countless reports, and even a congressional hearing, it all came down to nothing to see here. That must have been a huge letdown for people who believed that the government was hiding the truth about UFOs.
Yeah, it was a major blow to believers. And many people felt that the Condon Report, just like the Robertson panel's recommendations, was just another attempt to sweep the whole UFO issue under the rug. But the story of Project Blue Book doesn't end there. It doesn't end there.
Yeah, there's still more to uncover.
Yeah.
So much we haven't touched on yet.
Right. And, I think it's important to remember that even within Blue Book itself, there was always this tension between wanting to understand these unexplained events and also this pressure to, control the narrative.
Yeah.
And downplay public interest.
It's like this scientific tug of war between actual curiosity and a desire for secrecy. We saw it happen again and again, like with the Lubbock lights and those radar sightings in D.C., cases that were never really explained, but they were just dismissed by the people in charge.
Exactly those cases. They're perfect examples of how that pressure to debunk, which got so much stronger after the Robertson panel, it might have led to some really important cases being downplayed or maybe even buried. Makes you wonder how many other interesting reports got swept under the rug.
Right.
Because they didn't fit the narrative.
Right. And then there's that whole thing with the Robertson panel recommending they use propaganda to basically control what people thought about UFOs. That really makes you question their transparency and honesty.
Yeah. It's kind of creepy when you think about it. It shows how tangled up the whole UFO thing became with national security. And the Cold War paranoia. It wasn't just about science anymore. It was about control.
And think about Dr. Hynek. He went from being a total skeptic to having his entire worldview challenged. But what he was seeing, it must have been incredibly frustrating for him to see Blue Book turn into what he called a travesty of science.
Yeah, he was a man of integrity. He just couldn't reconcile his scientific principles with how Blue Book was being run. His critique in '68, it really exposed Blue Book's problems, but nobody listened.
It's a real shame. But his journey from skeptic to believer, or at least to someone more open-minded, it mirrors the journey that so many people go through when they start looking into UFOs. The more you learn, the more you realize how much we don't know.
Yeah, that's so true. And it brings us back to that big question. If there's really nothing to UFOs, like Blue Book said, then why all the secrecy? Why did the Air Force keep tracking them, even after Blue Book was shut down?
Right. It's almost like they knew there was something there, even if they wouldn't admit it publicly.
Officially, Project Blue Book ended in December 1969. The Air Force said that UFOs weren't a threat, that there was no evidence of advanced technology, and that they weren't extraterrestrial. But even after that statement, there were still 701 reports that were just labeled unidentified.
So they shut down the investigation. But hundreds of cases are still unexplained. And to make it even weirder, they sent all the Blue Book files to the Air Force archives at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama.
And one of the officials involved even said that they chose Maxwell because it was accessible yet not too inviting.
Accessible, yet not too inviting. That's a strange way to put it.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Like, they didn't want people looking too closely at those files.
So where does that leave us? Is the truth out there somewhere in those archives? Or is it all just misidentifications and Cold War paranoia, like the Air Force said?
That's the million-dollar question. And maybe it's one that we each have to answer for ourselves.
Maybe you're right. I think that's what's so great about a deep dive like this. It's not about giving you all the answers. It's about exploring all the mystery and controversy of a topic like Project Blue Book. And I hope this has inspired you to do your own research, maybe even look into those Blue Book files, and to look up at the night sky and just wonder, who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to uncover the truth about those unidentified flying objects.
Until then, Keep looking up, keep asking questions, never stop exploring.
That's great advice. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Project Blue Book. We'll see you next time.